Hello and welcome to Plus Sports, the show where we give a different perspective on sports as we look at the stories of athletes who not just amaze but also inspire. I'm Patricia Bermudez Hizon. Here we give you not just the latest in the sporting world, but also the stories behind the athletes' struggles, victories, and motivation. We go beyond the stats as we celebrate athletes and their great feats with you. Last night, the skies of Tokyo were lit up with a breathtaking fireworks display marking the end of the Tokyo Olympics. But before we leave and head for Paris, we take a look back at what happened at the Games. Here is our take on Tokyo. Last night, after 16 days of competition between the world's best athletes that was watched by billions across the globe, the curtain was closed on Tokyo 2020. The Olympics closing ceremonies was both subtle and festive as athletes gathered at the Olympic Stadium for the last time for another beautiful display of lights, sounds, and different elements of Japanese culture which formally closed the Games. This was one of the most challenging editions of the Olympics to host, and it was unlike any that came before it. And for successfully hosting the Games, all the athletes and officials can say to Japan is a heartfelt arigato as they bid Tokyo farewell. Also leaving Tokyo was the Philippine delegation, which will take home 4 Olympic medals. 1 gold courtesy of weightlifter Hidilyn Diaz, 2 silvers won by boxers Nesthy Petecio and Carlo Paalam, and 1 bronze medal from another boxer in Eumir Marcial. It was truly a triumph for the Philippines and for the Philippine sports as it marked the first time the country winning 4 golds at a single Olympics, making this our most successful Olympics ever and giving the country the most number of Olympic medals among Southeast Asian nations. With the Tokyo Olympics now in the books, all eyes now turn to Paris, which will host the next edition of the Olympics in 2024. And with most of our 19 Olympians still being very young, several of them have already expressed a desire to return to the Olympic stage in 3 years' time and hopefully try to win more medals for the country. And we can't wait to cheer them on as they compete in Paris for the next edition of the Games. But before we close the door on Tokyo, we can also support our Filipino athletes who will compete at the Tokyo Paralympics, which will take place from August 24 to September 5. 6 Filipinos have qualified for the Paralympics, namely swimmers Ernie Gawilan and Gary Behino, Gerald Mangliwan and Jeanette Aceveda in athletics, Alain Ganapin in taekwondo, and Ashel Guion in powerlifting. Of course, you can watch the Paralympics on Tap Sports on pay TV and follow the inspiring journey of our Pinoy Olympians there. We're rooting for these members of Team Pilipinas to make us proud at the Paralympics. Now, with the Tokyo Olympics reaching its conclusion, it's time for us to take a look at the final medal tally, which saw an exciting race even down to the final day of the Games. But at the end of the Olympics, it was still the United States which emerged on top of the most number of gold medals at 39 and total medals of 113. This marks the 3rd straight Olympics that the US will have the most gold medals and the 7th straight Olympics that they will take the most number of total medals. China finished second and was just 1 gold behind the Americans with 38, while having 88 medals overall. Host country Japan finished with 37 gold medals and 58 total medals, while Great Britain ended up with a 4th spot with 22 gold medals and 65 in total. The Russian Olympic Committee athletes finished 5th place with 20 gold medals and 71 total medals. Australia, the Netherlands, France, Germany, and Italy rounded up the top 10 countries with the most medals, while the Philippines finished at 50th place with 1 gold, 2 silvers, and a bronze. It marks the country's most successful stint at a single Olympics as the Philippine delegation leaves Tokyo with the most number of Olympic medals among Southeast Asian countries. And that is our take on Tokyo. Here on Plus Sports, we talk about different athletes and their accomplishments and the inspiring stories behind them. Today, we chose to shine the spotlight on the four athletes whose names will forever be written in Philippine sports history for winning Olympic medals at the Tokyo Games: weightlifter Hidilyn Diaz and boxers Nesthy Petecio, Carlo Paalam, and Eumir Marcial. Not only did they stand toe to toe and compete with the best athletes in the world, but they also overcame many challenges along the way in the long journey to an Olympic medal. Here is the story of our four Olympic medalists on athletes' feet. Heading into the Olympics, expectations were high for boxer Eumir Marcial as one of the top fighters in the middleweight division. Marcial surpassed those expectations, demolishing his first couple of opponents in the ring before a split decision loss in the semifinals ended his Olympic journey. But even in defeat, he showed a lot of heart as he suffered a cut in the opening round and still managed to finish the fight and take home a bronze medal for the country. Marcial has already said that he would represent the Philippines again given the opportunity, and we can't wait to see him get back in the ring for that. Nesthy Petecio was another fighter who was tipped a medal for the country after winning a world championship in 2019, among other accomplishments. And she also shattered everyone's expectations and breezed to the finals, where she lost a close decision to end up with the silver medal, the first ever Olympic medal for a Filipina boxer. Along the way, Petecio also proved that boxing is not only a sport for men and that women are also capable of competing and excelling in this sport. Carlo Paalam entered the Tokyo Olympics without having the same expectations as Marcial and Petecio, but nevertheless proved that he is also capable of winning a medal for the country. The 23-year-old Paalam proved that his lack of Olympic experience would not be a problem as he defeated taller and more experienced foes on his way to an Olympic silver medal. The accomplishment and the medal was special for him as he grew up as a scavenger and ended up receiving a medal made from discarded electronic gadgets, which he said reminded him of his humble roots. And finally, despite winning a silver at the Rio Olympics, the road to the Tokyo Olympics was anything but easy for Hidilyn Diaz. The COVID-19 pandemic put a half to her usual training, forcing her to stay in Malaysia and train there using water containers and other makeshift equipment. But in the end, with a chance to win an Olympic gold medal, Diaz lifted an Olympic record weight and an entire nation on her shoulders to end the country's Olympic medal drought, which opened the floodgates for other athletes who won 3 more Olympic medals after Diaz. These are the stories of the country's new generation of sports heroes and their Olympic journeys here on Athletes' Feet. Even before our 19 Filipino Olympians competed in Tokyo, they already made history, as it was the first time that there were more female athletes representing the Philippines at the Olympics than male athletes. And after more than 2 weeks of intense competition, 2 of those female athletes are Olympic medalists, and all 10 of them made the country proud in their respective sports. Today, we celebrate the 10 Filipina athletes who made history and represented the country at the Tokyo Olympics here on Women in Sports. While we are already familiar with Hidilyn Diaz and Nesthy Petecio's accomplishments in Tokyo, there were 8 other Filipina athletes who played for flag and country at the Olympics and gave a great account of themselves. Another weightlifter in the 22-year-old Elrin Ando competed in the women's 64-kilogram class and placed 7th among 12 competitors. With such a promising performance at such a young age, it wouldn't be surprising to see her in future Olympics. Another boxer who represented the country is Irish Magno, who competed in the women's flyweight division, where she reached the round of 16 before falling short of a medal. But even after her loss, Magno continued to be the biggest supporter of our remaining boxers who went on to take home 3 Olympic medals. Let's not forget that she is the first Filipina to qualify in Olympic boxing. Swimmer Remedy Rule competed in two events and even advanced to the semifinals of the women's 200-meter butterfly events, and certainly did the country proud with her performance. One of the Filipinos who represented the Philippines in athletics is sprinter Christina Knott, who competed in the women's 200-meter event. Though she struggled with the heat in Tokyo and had to be rushed to the medical station after the event, she nevertheless finished the race and did all she could for the country. Judoka Kiyomi Watanabe's Olympic journey also may have ended without a medal, but she also did the country proud after serving as one of her flag bearers during the opening ceremonies. The last of our athletes to compete are the golfers Yuka Saso and Bianca Pagdanganan, who finished tied for ninth place and tied for 43rd place in the women's tournament after a promising Olympic debut in golf. And lastly, who can forget skateboarder Marjolin Didal's debut on the Olympic stage? Didal didn't get to disappoint as she entered the final of the women's street skateboarding event and finished seventh. But it was her positive attitude as she competed and the way she supported the other skateboarders that captured the sporting world's attention. Marjolin not only competed against the world's best, but also had fun doing it. All of these female Olympians will be forever remembered in Philippine sports and will have no doubt also inspired countless other Filipino women to try sports and become future Olympians themselves. And those are the inspiring stories of our female Olympic athletes here on Women in Sports. Now we go to basketball, where we saw history being made in Tokyo at the end of the men's and women's basketball tournaments. The Tokyo Olympics also saw for the first time that 3-on-3 basketball was held at the Games, and we wrap up all these basketball tournaments right here on Inbound. The United States men's and women's basketball teams headed into Tokyo with high expectations of defending their gold medals, especially with both teams stacked with talent from the NBA and WNBA. But the men's basketball team faced a lot of questions in the weeks leading to the games. There were a lot of NBA All Stars who skipped the chance to play for the national team, and some of those who did were affected with COVID-19, forcing several roster changes. And then the team suffered losses to Nigeria and Australia in exhibition games in Las Vegas, raising questions about their chances of taking home another gold. But all those questions were answered in Tokyo, with Team USA defeating France in the final to win the country's fourth straight gold medal despite having a team of 10 first-time Olympians. In the process, Kevin Durant asserted himself as maybe the greatest player in men's Olympic basketball after winning a third gold medal and becoming the leading scorer for USA basketball at the Olympics. The women's team, on the other hand, did not experience similar bumps on the road on their journey to Tokyo, bannered by veterans like Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird, as well as talented WNBA stars in Aja Wilson, Brianna Stewart, and Brittany Griner. The team cruised through the group stage until the knockout stage, which culminated with a lopsided victory over Japan in the gold medal match. The win was the seventh straight gold medal for Team USA in women's basketball, with Taurasi and Bird winning their fifth straight Olympic gold medal, becoming the only basketball players to accomplish the feat. The Tokyo Olympics was also the site of the first ever 3x3 basketball tournament, where another team for the United States won the gold. However, it was a different story in the men's 3x3 basketball tournament, as it was Latvia who took home the gold, defeating the Russian Olympic Committee in the gold medal match 21-18. As a result, the team of Agnes Kavars, Edgars Krumens, Carlos Lesmanis, and Naris Mazis were named as the first ever gold medalists in Olympic men's 3x3 basketball. Meanwhile, it was a familiar sight in the women's 3x3 basketball tournament, with the United States taking home the gold after an 18-15 victory over the Russian Olympic Committee in the gold medal match. The team of WNBA stars and Stephanie Dolson, Alicia Gray, Kelsey Plum, and Jackie Young also wrote their names in history books by claiming the first Olympic gold at the event. We can't wait for the next editions of 5-on-5 and 3-on-3 basketball at the Paris Olympics. And that's all we've got, all about basketball, right here on Inbound. Now, the Olympics have wrapped up in Tokyo, and the torch has been passed on to Paris for the next edition of the Games. But we can't help but look back at what transpired during the more than 2 weeks that we watched the world's best athletes compete at the highest levels of sport. The Tokyo Olympics was truly an Olympics of firsts. It was the first one held during a time of a global pandemic, with a rising number of COVID 19 cases causing stricter health and safety protocols to be put in place and causing some of the athletes to miss the competition. The Tokyo Olympics also saw the addition of four new sports in skateboarding, sport climbing, karate, and surfing. And we even saw our very own Marjolin Didal compete in the street skateboarding event. These Olympics also saw the debut of mixed gender events, allowing male and female athletes to play together. There were several mixed gender events that made their Olympics debut, such as in archery, shooting, judo, swimming, track and field, and triathlon. These events show how the Games are expanding its horizons and becoming more inclusive of the athletes that are being allowed to compete at the Games. And finally, the Tokyo Olympics was an Olympics of first for a lot of athletes and countries, as it was the site of several personal records and achievements by the nations who competed. That includes, of course, the Philippines' first ever gold medal at the Olympics, courtesy of Hidilyn Diaz. That's one Olympic first that we'll certainly never forget, and it definitely won't be our last. For more sports stories here and abroad that not just inform but also inspire, you can follow Plus Network's Facebook and other social media pages. Thank you so much for joining us in our coverage of the Tokyo Olympics and the inspiring stories of athletes, including several of our own at the Games. We hope you can continue supporting our 6 Filipino athletes who will compete in the Tokyo Paralympics starting on August 24. That's it for us here on Plus Sports. I'm Patricia Bermudez Hizon. Thanks for watching.